Is the Washington Supreme Court going to take up the Pac-12 case? Find out next.
Expansion, realignment, and Pac-12 litigation is always in the news, so we're back on the Big Mountain, where we bring you a detailed focus on the Big Ten, the Mountain West, and everything in between.
Hey, it's good to have you here. I am JY, and this is my good friend Steve. And Steve, the Pac-12 saga continues.
Always.
Took another big step forward in terms of hearing from the Washington Supreme Court. That just happened yesterday, so let's break it down a little bit. I'm going to lay the groundwork about what kind of occurred, and then, of course, we'll get into some opinions on this. So on Friday, December 15th, we learned if the Washington Supreme Court would review the Pac-12's appeal, or really the Pac-10's, the Parting 10's appeal, of a lower court ruling on a preliminary injunction that would make OSU and WSU the only voting members of the conference. The ruling judge, Judge Levy, in a Whitman County Superior Court on November 14th, sided with the Pac-2's argument that the 10 departing schools relinquished their right to be voting members when they announced that they would be joining new conferences for the 24-25 school year. On November 15th, just a day later, Judge Levy's ruling was put on hold after a commissioner for the Washington Supreme Court found that UW's appeal had merit. So at that point, a day after Levy rules, a commissioner for the court, the Supreme Court, put a stay on that ruling, which then reverted back to the TRO, and that's kind of the life we've been living over the past month. Yep. That things were moving forward as a temporary restraining order. We just did a video on part of that in terms of revenue distributions. Yep. I'll put a link up here if you're interested in that one. But let's move forward. So yesterday, the Supreme Court for Washington State declined to review and hear this case. And I want to be clear because there's been some different reporting on this that they ruled in favor of OSU and WSU. That's not really what occurred. A little bit of semantics, but it wasn't that they ruled in favor of anyone. They just ruled that they're not going to hear the case. They don't want it coming before them, and we're not really sure why. I'm going to get into that here in a minute. So this means, as I said, the TRO now is where we're at. The stay is removed. Or is not where we're at. The stay is removed, so the preliminary injunction is now in place. Yep. So Judge Levy's ruling of a preliminary injunction and everything he said in that ruling is what's in place right now. Right. OSU President Murphy stated, and I'm going to speak a little bit of what she said here. She just said, "We are pleased with the Washington Supreme Court's decision today." This was yesterday. "We look forward to continuing our work of charting a path forward for the conference." This decision now puts the full control of the Pac-12, the assets, the liabilities, the revenue, the expenses, and distributions to school members, to schools, for this year in complete control of Murphy for OSU and Schultz for WSU. They are the only two voting members right now. The Supreme Court judges discussed this issue in a meeting in which they would have deliberated, asked questions, looked at what was given to them. There was a filing deadline. I believe it was about 5 or 6 days ago, so both sides could present their argument and files and things like that, and they obviously were to take that up and look at it and talk about it. But the meeting that they had, which was just yesterday, was not open to the public. And there was no minutes. There was no recordings of this. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we're going to get much more than what we know right now. There was a statement from them. I won't read it other than just to say, we're not going to review this case. Right. It's basically all you need to know. The decision states that the majority of the judges voted to deny the motions for review. That's basically all is what it said. The next move now will be up to the lower courts and the parties about where things are headed. Mm-hmm. So, Steve, we've kind of been waiting for this. I know we put out our last episode on Friday. Yep. Just before this came out. We had some commenters saying, hey, when's this going to happen? I was able to reply and say, actually, it's going to happen today. Right. And not only did the judges meet and discuss this, they actually came out with their answer on whether or not they were going to review it yesterday, and they're not going to review it. So I just want to hear your thoughts on this, and then I'll kind of maybe talk a little bit of next steps.
So, I mean, I think part of it, it's a little bit kind of anticlimactic, because I think, probably both sides, or everyone who's interested, was kind of interested to see, okay, what were the arguments going to be made? Yeah. What was the decision? And really, we have kind of a no decision.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't surprise me a ton. There's a lot of people I was reading, they were kind of surprised. We talked about this when Levy first ruled, and he put a stay on his own order, and then one of the commissioners at the Supreme Court, decided to push that case up as a case they could potentially consider.
Right.
That the different states, their different Supreme Courts have different criteria as to why they will hear a case. One, it could be if it goes against the state's constitution, if they thought it was a matter or something like that, or it could be if there was some kind of a technical ruling where the lower court judge didn't apply the law correctly, where it was obvious, where you would see something like that. They don't always just take cases just because maybe they disagree with the lower court or whatever. There has to be, in most cases, there has to be something, some kind of a reason. So it was kind of a 50-50. It could have gone either way. So somewhat surprised, definitely a little anticlimactic, but not completely surprised. The one thing I'll say is, there's still a lot of avenues. We've talked about this from the beginning, that this could eventually go all the way to the United States Supreme Court. Even Judge Levy, when he first talked about this in the first couple hearings, said, there and the lawyers that brought arguments in his court said, there are a whole bunch of legal arguments that go across state lines, and this might be something that ends up going to the U.S. Supreme Court. So we'll see. We're another step farther. Now, it's not necessarily a decision, but it is obviously a win for Oregon State and Washington State, because it keeps in place that injunction by Levy. So this is two rounds in a row where they have gotten a win. So it makes you wonder, okay, will this put the right now my biggest question is, and maybe you're going to talk about this further, is will the other 10, does this put them in a position where they're like, okay, we got to get some kind of settlement, we got to get something going out the door, or are they going to dig their heels in? Could they go to California and file suit? Could they try and take this to the federal Supreme Court? Yeah. That's my next question.
Right. And I was going to get there next. A couple things I want to say, and you mentioned why they wouldn't hear it. And they're not going to hear it just because it's a high-profile case of college football either, right? Like, so we would love to hear what they have to say. And I am a little surprised that they're not hearing it. But I guess that's more of me saying this is from what we do and what we do on this podcast, it's a high-profile case. That's not a reason why they would necessarily take it over, just because it's newsworthy, if you will. So I think that's another. I think a lot of us were thinking they might review it. I know I was thinking they might review it just because of what it is and what it could mean nationwide. And this is just kind of the next step. But that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't meet the criteria of why they would review something.
Right.
I did want to also point out a couple things. I saw a couple reporters stating there hasn't, that I have found, been a statement from the Pac-10, the parting 10, on this yet. I saw one person kind of bloviate that they were unprepared for this, so they don't have a statement yet. I guarantee you they're not unprepared for this. They have a contingency plan for their contingency plan. So the fact that they just didn't make a statement yet, I don't find that overly concerning, quite frankly. But I've seen a lot of people kind of, and I'm going to get to another tweet that you sent me as well, kind of like, oh, they weren't ready for this, and oh, see, they should have settled, and Monday morning quarterbacking this. And I'm not sure that's necessarily fair. To your point, this was round 2. I'd say Judge Levy was round 1, or maybe so TRO was round 1, the preliminary injunction was round 2. If you want to call this round 3, I think that's kind of tough because they're just not reviewing it. It's not like they heard it.
Right.
So we'll call it round 3. So it's definitely 3-0 for the Pac-2 right now, 100%. So I think at this point, the departing 10 have a plan. And let's get to that, because that was going to be the next piece. Like, what could be next? And you mentioned settlement. Oh, go ahead.
Before you state what they're pretending, it doesn't do them any good right now. There's no benefit for them releasing a statement. The two, it's obvious why they want to release a statement. Hey, we feel like we won this.
That's right.
We're moving forward. We have the the case. We have the strongest case. We're 3-0. We have control. We're moving forward.
Right.
For the other 10, there's nothing, absolutely nothing whatsoever to be gained right now, because all they would do would be to tip their hand on what the next step is. I think that's what you're going to get to next.
Well, it is, and I'll make their statement for them. You ready? We're disappointed in the Supreme Court's ruling.
Yeah.
That's all they're going to say,
right.
To your point. That's their statement. I just made it for you. But yeah, let's move ahead now. So to your point, obviously one of them is continued settlement. Will it come via mediation? And that's the next piece I wanted to talk about. You had sent me a tweet where there's some people saying, well, it looks like, and I don't know how factual this is, but the tweet you sent me was that the two sides were very close to a mediated settlement about a month ago, maybe early November, before the preliminary injunction hearing, I believe is when it was.
We were hearing that at the time, that the two sides were really close.
Correct. So there's reports now, how close is really close, who knows? But they're saying that it was actually the departing 10 that were hesitant and not in agreement with it. So that's interesting. Obviously now you've got, as I said, the Monday morning quarterbacking saying, wow, I bet they really wish they would have had that settlement.
Yeah.
Whoa, hold up, timeout. There's a lot more to be had here. I think there's a lot more to be had here. But point taken. I mean, if they were that close and now you don't have if they were hopeful that the Washington Supreme Court was going to hear this case and now they're not,
right.
Yeah, that's not great. It definitely, and we heard that in the preliminary injunction hearing when Levy was really pressing them
yes.
about mediation, and if I gave you more time, and at that point, all of them said, the departing 10, the Pac-12, and the Pac-2, the Pac-12 conference and the Pac-2 all said, we need something now. We need you to make a ruling now.
So that we have an idea of what there is.
So we know who's maybe in more power right now and who can kind of lean a little bit harder on other sides. Well, now that we have that preliminary injunction in place and that the Supreme Court's not going to hear this, you clearly see who's in somewhat of a control. And even if they go back to that mediated settlement as is this enough just from the courts to get the departing 10 to agree to that? I don't know. Will OSU and WSU now want more because they feel like they have more power? Maybe they will. So still a mediated settlement, I still think, and I agree with you, we've been saying this for a while, a lot of people have, is the way this is going to proceed. The other option here is continued legal action, and this could be in any jurisdiction. Everything that we've had right now has been at the state of Washington. Yep. This could easily move to the state of California, which is where the Pac-12 conference home base is, or any of the Pac-12, the existing Pac-12 schools. It could go to any one of those states if they wanted to try to push forward. I would say, because of what we've heard in the past, the departing 10 have used California law in some of their past arguments. To me, that's what we're going to see happen next. If a mediated settlement doesn't occur, something's going to happen in the California courts. That's my guess. So how do you feel about this?
Yeah, there's been speculation that California would have been a friendlier court, and that, from the beginning, maybe the 10 should have filed in California before, and OSU, WSU kind of headed them off, filed in Washington, because they always felt from the very beginning that Washington, whether it's the law, how the courts are made up, how the courts work there, that the state of Washington would be a friendlier court for them. So yes, I think if we see continued action, probably the next step would be in the state of California. And a lot of people think that would be a friendlier court. You have a couple of schools affected there. You have Cal, you have UCLA, both there. Those are both state schools. And both of those schools are on the same side. Right. Whereas in Washington, you have Washington State versus Washington. So definitely could be friendlier. We'll see. I think that's their kind of their next. I feel like there's two possible paths. If they were to go the California route and that didn't work out, I don't see them going to another state, another jurisdiction.
Agree.
Unless they want to try and go all the way to the federal Supreme Court. And then we're talking, this could stretch out, into next season.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. If they're going to give it another go, I agree. It's going to be in California. It's going to have to be from one of the schools. It's not going to be, obviously, at this point, from the Pac-12 conference, because the Pac-12 conference is controlled by two schools right now, to which they're not going to bring up litigation on this. They have the control. So it's going to have to be either USC, UCLA, Cal, or Stanford. And I'm with you. I could see it probably being Cal or UCLA would be the two that I would say would likely head this up, and maybe they do it as a combined, to your point, combined, what do you call it? Not defense, plaintiff.
Yes.
Combined
Yeah.
plaintiff. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I see a lot of people waving victory flags, and rightfully so. At this point where we stand right now, OSU, WSU, you control the Pac-12. I get it, but I don't think it's over.
I had one other thought on the California the issue. So what's really interesting there, not only are there two schools there, one is going to the Big Ten, one is going to the ACC.
Good point.
There was already, with the California Board of Regents, which controls the whole system, there was already a fight there when UCLA was going to leave to go to the Big Ten. Cal either staying or going to the ACC, and the Board of Regents ordered payments to be made from Cal to, or from UCLA to Cal, to kind of even the playing field. So I wonder if that were, that's just another interesting rabbit hole to go into. If they file in California, we'll have to look at that some more. So that could be an interesting topic to talk about in the future.
Yeah, I have a funny feeling within the next week we're going to be having another episode, because I think the Pac-12 will make a move. I'm sorry. One or more of the departing 10 schools are going to make a move here. So, hey, stay with us. If you're new to this channel, we have been covering this for quite a while. Make sure you subscribe. We're going to stay on this until it's finalized, which I think is a ways off. And I'm going to come back and just say, the longer this goes on, the worse it is for everybody, but specifically Oregon State and Washington State. And to me, that's the pressure on their side for a settlement. The quicker we can get this put to bed, the quicker we can truly move on with a merger, with rebuild, with whatever you're going to do. So there's still pressure on both sides to try and get this thing figured out.
I agree with that, and I have a question for our audience. And I'm hoping they'll put some comments in.
Awesome.
So now that the two basically have control, with the injunction being in place, the two have control for now. I want to, from our audience, because there's been the Commissioner K.
Yes.
It seems to be a very polarizing figure from all sides. So if you're a fan of Washington State, Oregon State, any of the other Pac schools, or Mountain West fan, or just somebody, I want to hear from you. What do you think this means for the commissioner? There's been a lot of kind of charges and accusations that he screwed up the final negotiation with the media deal that led to this. So I'm interested, do they just go ahead and fire him? Do they look for cause?
Yeah.
Because at the very beginning, it kind of seemed like the league office was kind of on the side of the departing 10.
Yes,
we talked about that. So could those two use it as cause to fire him? So I'm interested in what our viewers think on what this means, what this ruling means for Commissioner K.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like when things got hot and heavy, Commissioner K and President Schultz, who was the not only the president of Washington State, but the president of the Pac-12 board, were definitely not talking the same language. They were definitely at odds. So, yeah, very, very good question. I like that. We'd love to hear from our viewers. We got some great comments on the last few episodes. So that's great. Hey, just as a reminder, we are going to be picking every bowl game. We have our first live episode coming out. We're going to go live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday the 19th. We'd love to have you here, even if you're not interested in betting or in the games we're going to be picking. I know we've got some awesome subscribers, guys that and girls that comment quite often. Would love to have you here just to say hi and whatever the case. Maybe we'll give something away, Steve.
Okay.
We have our merch store open now, and maybe we'll give something away to the people that choose to listen to us bloviate about some of these bowl games. I said that word twice now.
I love it.
That's my word, bloviate. Yeah. But anyway, hey, we thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.
It's bowl season, baby.